What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and a big story broke late last week, and you may be shocked, you may be appalled to find that nobody is really covering it. This is an important topic because it goes directly, it flies directly in the face of a lot of what GG was saying about journalists being ethical, and it flies in the face of this whole "we're being review brigaded" storyline done by a lot of modern day journalists because, well, it exposes them as, in fact, the most sinister and unethical of them all.
Hello, I like money.
Late Friday, or over the weekend actually, Richard Lewis, R.L. Lewis, DM'd me a story in the Washington Post about Netflix sending journalists on pricey trips and raising questions about angering rivals. Now, this article, this expose was printed in the Washington Post, which it should be pointed out that the publication running the story is owned by the billionaire that owns Amazon, whose Prime streaming service is a direct competitor to Netflix. That is also pointed out by Richard Lewis as well. So the point is, whatever their motivations are, though, it doesn't change what was exposed. And it's interesting to see when you look at a lot of the financials. First of all, the 400 journalists on this list, I want their names. They should all be published and therefore permanently discredited to the general public. These names should be released somehow, some way. Now, Netflix is actually facing a lot of concerns. If you look at the Motley Fool, which is a financial site that looks at a lot of different aspects of the entertainment industry as well as investing and things like that, they point out that Netflix has a money problem. They go on to say, "I might not be the only one who's canceling my Netflix subscription." Earlier this year, Needham analyst Laura Martin predicted that Netflix will lose 4 million subscribers in the US in 2020. If anything close to that happens, Netflix will start to have a real cash problem. They post a graph, so you can see the chart below. Netflix is burning through billions of dollars in cash in order to build out its original content library. The build out is based on the idea that subscriber revenue will grow long term. Now, if you are a subscriber of Netflix, Hulu, the whole space itself is getting worse and worse. It's frustrating because they were like, the chosen one, you are the chosen one, because they had everything, right? Then all of a sudden they lost The Simpsons to Disney Plus. Then they lost the Marvel shows. Then they lost this. Then they lost that. Netflix, for me, made a lot of sense as a cable cutter because it was like, $15 a month. Now I can watch whatever I want to watch whenever I want to watch it. It's a no-brainer. Then it was like, oh no, I need Hulu now too. Oh, now I need Disney Plus. Now I'm just turned off to all of it. And Netflix, by and large, has become more or less of a convenience in still getting the same experience as TV, and more about finding the peanut in the turd that's an actual good show. And now we might know why so many of these shows receive so much press and so many positive reviews. When you look at this article on the Motley Fool, which I'll link in the description as well, Netflix advantages are being called into question, saying there are two advantages Netflix bulls often point to, those are investors, two competitive advantages. But I want to question both here. The first is that Netflix investment in original content is building a massive library for consumers to dive into. The library may be big, but I have no emotional attachment to any of it. And that's exactly how I feel. There's a huge content of what I would call Hallmark's quality movies on there.
When we would lie in bed together, sometimes I would look at you and see her and just feel so gross.
If I go and I'm like, hey, I look on Google, hey, what are the best horror films on Netflix? They're all like some Netflix original, and the overwhelming majority of them are awful. Documentaries, the overwhelming majority of them are awful, and worse, many of them are biased. So I don't really have any emotional attachment to them. That's why cutting the cord is so easy. It's like, okay, my wife likes Stranger Things, and when shows like The Irishman happen, people one up for a month and they watch it, or they get in a boat and they paddle out into deeper waters, which of course I disavow, and they watch what they need to watch. It's so a la carte now that there's really no reason to just kind of leave your subscription running. And then you saw an article where they're running a show with a gay Jesus or something like that. People are offended. I'm personally not. Obviously, I don't care. But when you do stuff like this, when you're purposely edgy, you're going to run people off, and Netflix tends to do that every once in a while. The article goes on further. I care much more about the Marvel Universe or catching up on Star Wars content than I do anything about Netflix. By contrast, I never watched more than one season of Orange is the New Black or House of Cards, arguably Netflix's tentpoles. There's no nostalgia in Netflix content. There's so much of it, I couldn't possibly keep up if I wanted to. Given the flood of content, the water cooler talk about a new show usually amounts to something like, have you seen show X? And response like, no, what's it about? There's no common viewing experience on Netflix shows. If you want to fall back into a comfort zone, there are much better options on Disney Plus, HBO Max, or the upcoming Peacock TV. Never even heard of that. Again, I'm out. I'm out paying for TV anymore. I'll keep Hulu because I want to get my sports in HD, and that's it. I'm out. For kids, there's nothing quite like Disney. And Netflix hasn't made a dent on this, at least in my house. The second thesis many Netflix bulls use is the Netflix algorithm is so powerful that no one could possibly top it. Sure, Netflix has years of data on what I watch, but I can only show a handful of options at a time. And with a fire hose of new content it's trying to promote, it seems like I spend more time scrolling through content I've never heard of than watching shows. Very true. Data is only good as what you do with it, and Netflix algorithm may be able to know everything about what I've watched over the past decade, but it hasn't been able to keep me from switching my viewership to newer apps with fewer scattershot pieces of content. And that's exactly what Netflix does in terms of their content. It becomes more about spray and pray as opposed to focusing on high quality. Now, that isn't to say that they don't have great shows. Like I said, Stranger Things, although... am I as invested in season 3 of Stranger Things as I was in season 1?
No.
Was I big into Netflix to get Trailer Park Boys? Yes. But the last 2 seasons of Trailer Park Boys, especially without Dunham, without Leahy, it's not the same. So it's like a lot of these shows that drew me into Netflix originally just aren't there or aren't interesting to me anymore. And then when I read this via the Washington Post, Netflix sends journalists on pricey trips, raising questions and angering rivals. When the Critics' Choice Awards, an annual Hollywood ceremony reflecting on the taste of hundreds of critics, announced its nominees last Sunday, one company rose above the others. Netflix reached 61 television nominations, nearly double its nearest competitor. The streaming giant has also had the movie with the most nominations, Scorsese's The Irishman, and nearly half of the Best Actor in Field. This all makes sense because every time I read endless articles about how amazing this new show is, and I watch it and I'm like, meh. Like, it's odd outside of the horror genre when I watch something on Netflix and it's like objectively horrible, but I've almost never been like, yo, you got to see this show on Netflix, or oh my God, I saw this movie on Netflix. It was so good. It's so rare. This time of year is known for the Hollywood award season as entertainment business, blah, 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 blah. But the specter of the company sending journalists on free trips to achieve that aim opens a new front in these prize wars, demonstrating Netflix's win-at-all-costs mentality when combined with the ability to foot the costs. The Post has learned of at least 4 such trips this year. All of them included high-end stays at hotels, private encounters with filmmakers and stars, according to 3 people who are familiar with the events but not authorized to speak about them personally or publicly. Interviews with 10 execs, award consultants, and experts, many of whom spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the matter's sensitivity and because they don't want their credibility destroyed, obviously, suggest that these trips for the Critics' Choice Association members have become a flashpoint in the industry recently beset by deep-pocketed Silicon Valley players. To traditional studios, such trips mark one more way these new newcomers are using their weight to bend accepted practices, often corralling media in their effort. The tech companies, meanwhile, believe they are just doing what studios have always done, spending money to win award votes. They are. They simply object to the corporate envy. 3 of these such trips for The Irishman, Dolomite Is My Name, and The Two Popes were in LA, a 4th recently in New York for A Marriage Story. Journalists were put up at hotels that included the W, Four Seasons, and Beverly Hilton. These are all ultra 4-star hotels in LA, and the JW Marriott Essex House in New York. One CCA member who accepted the trip for The Two Popes said it included airfare to LA, a breakfast with the filmmakers, tickets to the premiere at Hollywood's Chinese Theater, and a stay at the Beverly Hilton Hotel where the Golden Globes take place. About 40 such people were on that trip, said the person, who asked not to be identified because they didn't want to be known as having taken it. Whoa, shocking! Shocking. You know what's funny is because Richard Lewis points out in his tweet, Netflix, as his quote says, Netflix sent 400 critics on expensive trips to encourage positive reviews for votes for awards. And you wonder, while journalists have spent the last 5 years telling you that asking about, quote, ethics in journalism is a dog whistle for something more similar. It continues. The Irishman trip included private news conference with principals from the film, including Scorsese and Al Pacino, tickets to the premiere at the Chinese Theater, which was turned into a New York street for the occasion, replete with vintage cars, elaborate sets, packs of Uber vouchers, and a stay at the Four Seasons. Accommodations at the hotel range from $500 for the most basic room to more than $2,000. The Dolomite trip was a broader event sponsored by CCA. Netflix originally declined to comment, but after the story was published, a spokeswoman emailed the following statement. We're incredibly proud of our films, and that's what we're focusing on. Hosting members of the media at junkets, news conferences, and events is a long-standing industry practice, and one that all studios use. Right, sure, fine by me. We all knew they did this. When all these journalists are constantly attacking the fandoms, calling us toxic, whining about review brigades, they are the very same people that are getting expensive trips to LA and New York that none of us could afford, and we're supposed to believe that that has nothing to do with their awards and how they attack fandoms who may be critical of shows and so on and so forth. This is a big story that nobody else is covering in the journalism space. I wonder why. I hope you share it around. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.
I like money.